Okay, well, Project Veritas, as many of you know, has released the tapes that Ivory Hecker, the Fox 26 Houston reporter, promoted on her last live shot, which we all assumed would be her last live shot because she basically said she was busting her station on their own air. And then she went to a story about air conditioning and heat with a guy with a lot of sweat on his back who has probably no clue that he was a part of this, this moment that was going to go viral on the internet. So I have my friends Bill Dorris and Mike Rausch here, who were all former TV newsies. Bill has been a photojournalist and a master control operator, news director, all kinds of different jobs. Mike, you were a news director in multiple markets. So I figured, we could give people a perspective that maybe a lot aren't getting. Some nuances about what she brought up, what Project Veritas had in their 17-minute piece, which I'm not going to play a lot of because I know they have robust legal team. So I don't want them coming after me for copyright issues, but we are going to play the first part real fast, which I thought was interesting, where she discusses how the news director and the general manager on the phone with her saying they're going to be essentially approving everything she posts on social media. And it sounds like this was in reaction to stuff she was posting about hydroxychloroquine and or censorship of treatments for COVID, maybe specifically hydroxychloroquine. There are some unanswered questions, but let me just play this real fast and we'll go from there. Oh, hang on. Let me unmute it. Wait. Hang on. Rookie error. You'd think that
the microscope, you're not posting.
Here we go.
Schiller and assistant news director Lee Meyer.
Everything's going to be under the microscope. You're not posting anything without Susan or I signing off on it.
Industry executives who are the people who hire us and keep us employed. That's the part that needs to make a difference to them. It's not just about the viewers. It's about what our CEO reads. It's about what our GM reads.
It's not just about the viewers. It's about what our CEO reads. It's about what our GM is, general manager. What does that mean to you?
That means that corporate values are above the viewer's interests. So in journalism school, we are taught your first loyalty is to the citizen. That right there is saying we don't abide by journalism. We abide by corporate values.
Okay. Would either one of you like to opine about this first part?
Well, I think that what you see with her story is that she has had a number of frustrating issues as a reporter, which all reporters do with getting story ideas approved and that sort of thing. And then she jumped into the hydroxychloroquine story, and somehow that seems to be a taboo topic there at the station, just as it was around the country, right? So we know that at that time, mainstream media was crushing that story. Nothing could be said positive about it because Trump had endorsed it, and also with big media. So I think she walked into a world there where everyone was incredibly sensitive and lacked the courage to really allow her to explore that story. That said, we really don't know from this video interview with her exactly what she did and exactly what the issues were.
Yeah, it's hard to know what she was posting and, what the lead into this was, what the conversations that she had with her bosses were. I will say it's not uncommon. It's probably par for the course for reporters, as I was one, to sign a contract saying that you represent the station at all times, even when you're off. So if you get drunk at a bar and you say something terrible and you offend someone, your boss can, hold you accountable for that because you're representing the station. You are a part of the brand. And so, you don't really have free speech when you work for corporate news. You sign a contract that says you're representing them. And that means they can tell you everything from what you're allowed to say to what you're allowed to wear, to the haircut, which, I had many conversations with. I remember one of my old bosses said I had a kooky dress wardrobe. I'll never forget that in Tampa, Florida. Thanks, guys. But anyway, we all go through that, and so I didn't necessarily, though it gets frustrating, and I do have a question about this. It did not surprise me at all that these conversations are happening. These happen all the time. for both of you, though, where does the line get crossed between, because she was saying she was muzzled, where does the line between sort of the editorial control power, judgment, process, whatever you want to call it, move into, a concerted effort to suppress information if you're a news station, because some people might say, hey, it's editorial decisions and that's what newsrooms do. And others like her say she was being censored or suppressed. So where do you draw the line there?
Ever since I've been involved in drawing up contracts, contract negotiations, and stuff like that, I guess you could say ever since I was in administration, social media was a thing. And there was always these clauses, like you said, Allison, about you're always on, you're always representing the station. But there was this kind of common sense fine line to where if you have a Twitter account that says Ivory Hecker, Fox 26 reporter, then that's the part that can be editorialized and the stuff that you can only say what the station says you can say. Now, if she's got her own Twitter where it's Ivory Speaks and the little disclaimer, these are my thoughts are my own and not representative of my employer, there's really nothing they can say about that. And that's how I've always operated in terms of contracts with talent. And I don't understand why she thinks not being able to report that on their platform is her being muzzled or silenced or censored in any way. That's not the case.
Well, just as a caveat to that, though, we had a reporter who, I don't know if you call her a reporter. She was an on-air talent for a former employer of mine. And on her personal page was making many comments about Trump voters. And she got muzzled, as Ivory would say. Okay, this was on her personal page because people were seeing it and taking screenshots, sending it in. So you would have to take stuff off your personal page. That was not uncommon either when I was in the business. You couldn't go on a rant on even your personal account because anything that people could snap and send in or put out there, like I said, even before social media, you get drunk at a bar and you say something. All right, well, too bad you're representing the station. Mike, just to you real fast, when she brings up the CEO, the GM, you said before we started recording that it's odd that all these, first off, the GM's even on a phone call with a reporter, because typically that's a high level disciplinary call if the GM is on with you. Are they also, in reference to that, when they're talking about the CEO, is that the CEO of like Fox Core, or is that the CEO of the station? And can you run us through a little bit about, the management involved in what she's discussing? Because I think there's a lot of confusion for the general public about Fox News Channel versus Fox Core, Fox O&O, Fox Affiliate, and how those differ in their editorial decision-making.
Well, I'll try to go through it quickly. I never worked within the Fox organization, but you obviously have two groups that people would think of as Fox. You have Fox News Channel, right? Conservative, that drill. Then you have the Fox O&O stations, which are separate from Fox News Channel. So they're friendly with each other, but they don't, and they cooperate with each other, but they aren't the same entity really by any measures. And I think, so what happened with her and with her news director, obviously she walked into this hydroxychloroquine minefield that is taboo these days, right? Not taboo on Fox News, right? Where they were talking about it all the time, but I think taboo in her newsroom, perhaps, and taboo with the corporate people who were above her there. So when she walked into that minefield, that got the attention, I think, of, the immediate corporate folks, perhaps, a VP of news, if they have one. I can't say that they do, and their general manager. So that's where you had the trickle down effect here, where the general manager was then leaning on the news director and the assistant news director to say, hey, you better rein her in. She's saying things that we don't really want to be saying. Remember, because the hydroxy story was fundamentally banned on multiple levels. And I think especially also at local station levels. So when she walked into it and she wanted to be able to speak freely about it and post about it, because it is connected to the whole censorship issue, that's where I think the hammer came down that she needed to be brought into line. And she saw that as being muzzled, which I think is a fair criticism of it. And I think the bigger picture now is that times are different. I left the news business 2 years ago, and we didn't have taboo stories like this, right? If you look at, you couldn't say anything positive about Trump. He never did anything positive. You had the Second Amendment, which we've talked about before. You can never say anything positive about that. Black Lives Matter could not be criticized. Local stations really did no criticism of that, even though, there are questions to be asked. And then the hydroxy story too, there are just lots of questions that you can ask. People want to know about that, but it was just, the door was shut. Anyone watching this video, I asked this question: did you see any local stations going after the hydroxy story and looking at it from both sides? I doubt they did. So I think that's what she got caught up in and was frustrated about. The normal issue of editorial decisions as to what stories get done in the newscast or whatever, that's based on research, and that's pretty normal. I mean, all companies research what their viewers or what their customers are interested in. So that's not out of line, and that's not crazy.
Fox came out.
Can be frustrating for reporters, Allison, as you know.
Yes. Well, as you were bringing that up, I thought that would be a good segue into this part of it, which I guess I'll play this really quick clip. And let me just find it. This was about the Bitcoin. Maybe Bill. Oh, here we go. You could set us up real fast, Bill, with what we're about to see with Bitcoin, and I'll play it in a second.
So this is the biggest part of this story for me, and why more people are not talking about it. Why are there not people protesting at what I consider, and others that I have spoken to be a blatantly racist comment? Forget Ivory being censored, forget all the other stuff involved. Listen to what this lady says.
Okay, here we go. Let me just make sure I got this audio running my own master control, and here we go. Oh, and it's muted again. Sorry, here we go.
I have passed on Bitcoin stories by almost every single reporter for our 5 o'clock audience, because that's not our 5 o'clock audience. So there are lots of reasons. If I know our numbers are tanking from 5 to 6, and in one particular segment, an older woman, whatever, I may say, yeah, the Bitcoin for African-American audience at 5, it's probably not going to play. That's a choice I'm making, an editorial choice.
Okay, so this brings up the question of demos, the ratings, and all. And I think that this is something obviously that is also not new. I was often asked what the soccer mom making macaroni and cheese at home was going to care about my story, and I got to the point where it's like, I don't care if she doesn't care. I mean, I remember even saying that. Why? I'm sure maybe I was considered a problem employee. I don't know. But I remember saying back to our web producer, is that the hoop I have to jump through for every single story? Like, maybe she doesn't care about the killer whales. Like, I don't know, why does it always have to be her? But it really, I guess, came down to the fact that they decided, some research showed that, I don't know, is she spending the most money for the family? And so she's the one you want to keep to the commercial break. And, this is, again, Bill, you said earlier, like, none of this, like, this is not shocking, and that you feel like Project Veritas, sort of built it up to be bigger than it was. I think that's because we look at this and we're like, this has been going on for such a long time. I do think COVID amped up the censorship side of things, and the political division. Of course, Trump did too, his presidency. But, for the general public, I do think they watch this and they're like, what? What are you doing? And we're like, yeah, I mean, that's, what goes on the top of the 4 o'clock is not what goes on at the top of the 5. The 4 o'clock, if you're following Ellen, is like, hey, everybody, we're going to teach you how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches without ever taking out your knife or spoon. We'll do it all with our hands. And then at 5 o'clock, it's like, 16 people were murdered down the street. You better stay tuned, but you would never want to put that after Ellen, right? So all that stuff is happening. So I don't know, either one of you guys want to take that away with the demo side of things?
Oh, well, I can explain it, because news managers have it drummed into their heads that research is incredibly important. Who are the demos, and research is done as to what types of stories people are interested in. Also, that you format different shows, right? Because the 4 o'clock is going to be different from the 5 o'clock show, going to be different from the 6 and the 10. Right. So you have those basic parameters. So the assistant news director was living within those parameters that have been set at her station. She also lives in a world where the ratings are incredibly important. Right. She lives and breathes it every day. It's her greatest fear that something's going to go wrong, or that a story will go in there that will tune people out. So,
and why is that, Mike? Why is that her greatest fear?
Because it's all about ratings when you're in news management.
Meaning she's going to lose her job if the ratings tank, or
no, she wouldn't lose her job over it, but it's her job to keep that newscast on point, right? So what I would do if somebody came and pitched a story that didn't fit at 5, I'd say, hey, that's a great idea. That story would fit better at 4 o'clock, right? It's just, where does it fit? And I think that's where the assistant news director was going with that story. I don't think there was anything involved in it other than she's lived in a world of consultants who say, do this. Her corporate news people will say, do this. Her news director, who's been trained to do the same thing, will tell her to do that. And so those newscasts can get formatted to a pretty high degree. And, you know, it's the square peg and the round hole kind of thing. And to her point, the Bitcoin, which I think Bitcoin's a big story, didn't fit in that newscast and with the people that are watching at that time. Now, if they have a different audience at a different time, the Bitcoin story could go there. Any other myriad of other stories could fit. So I don't think there was anything evil in her comment there, but you can see how it's frustrating for reporters who may not understand it to the degree that news managers do, and the agenda that's set for them by their news management. Make sense?
Yeah, but I mean, I do think I've heard a lot of reaction to people that are like, you know, either like, at worst, that was a racist thing for her to say. At best, it, you know, was
insensitive,
greedy and insensitive. Yeah. And I know that like Bill comes in. I mean, maybe, I guess you could look at it maybe like a classist thing. Like, in other words, so you wouldn't want to give so you're just like, oh, those poor people don't deserve to know about Bitcoin, you know, whatever color their skin is, you know, they shouldn't know about, but maybe they want to know about something that's different so that they can, you know, so that they don't need to be poor anymore. I don't know. And instead of just like sort of assume that people that don't have a lot of money wouldn't be interested in Bitcoin. I do think it kind of shows maybe some of the I guess just bias and stereotypes that news managers can be working with. And that doesn't just go for that particular issue, but what is a Trump supporter like? What is somebody who questions vaccines like, you know, the COVID vaccine? What is somebody, and so when you work with these kinds of stereotypes of not just your viewership, but the people within the stories that you're covering, then it affects coverage.
Yeah, I think you can make that case, but I don't think that was her point here. I think she just narrowly was looking at what types of stories that they've kind of over time become comfortable with putting in that time slot. And you can make the case too with crypto. How many people own crypto? Not many, right? 1% of all investors, maybe at this point. So it's not a broad story, but it's a fascinating story. The other point she could have made was, how do we tell that story, right? How do we approach it? How do we set it up? That might have been a different way to look at it as opposed to just saying no. The other thing too is, do your news managers have the flexibility to not live by the straight lines that are laid out for them by their research and by their consultants and by the way they've always done it? So an awful lot do and some don't.
Bill, anything else to add before we move on to our next topic?
I appreciate Mike's very eloquent explanation. I'm going to break it down into I guess, layman's terms. I think it's very insensitive and borderline racist to sit there and think that an African-American demographic wouldn't be interested in a Bitcoin story. That is incredibly insensitive in my point of view.
Okay, I'm going to play this last clip here.
Six? Yeah. How come you guys are like the all vaccine all the time channel?
We hire producers, which are the ones that write the show, that are right out of college, about 25 years old. They don't pay them squat. They just regurgitate what they're fed.
Okay.
That guy's my spirit animal. Love him.
Yeah.
And a photographer, just like you were.
He's a photog, and he's telling the truth.
Yeah, you don't want to get the photogs anywhere near the cameras because they'll take the station down.
Well, he's calling it like he sees it, and it's a topic we had touched on in a previous video that we did, talking about the producers in newsrooms. Right? They're very young, they're very woke, they're hard left for the most part. There may be exceptions. They're very unwilling to accept parameters outside what is currently accepted, especially in the COVID world. So I don't think it's that they're not paid that well in his market. in Houston. Producers are paid okay, but the experience isn't there, right? And so you don't get that context that you would really like to see. And for a photographer, he sees it every day, and that's what he sees, and he gave it to you pretty straight, I think.
They may be paid crap. In Seattle, I believe they were making somewhere between like 50, 60K, which that doesn't go very far in a city like Seattle.
Houston is a very large, very expensive metropolitan area. Does it have its bad parts? Of course, every city does. But I'm telling you, when I was in Lexington, the station I worked at in Lexington had a producer fresh out of college that was producing our noon newscast, and they were paying her $22,000 a year. She couldn't live off that, found another job, and because she broke the last 3 months of her contract, they sued her for it. It's ridiculous what these poor kids are getting paid, especially when you consider the amount of money that they're generating for these companies. You take a station like Bowling Green, Kentucky, one of the stations here, they make a ton of money because there's nowhere else to advertise. But that money's not put back into the people that are making that money, those 22-year-old reporters or anything like that. They're sending that money to Louisville, or they're sending that money to Nashville, or the stations that are struggling because news business is dying.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. I mean, broadcasting has never paid the people at the bottom, working their way up incredibly well. They've never overpaid. I would just say that. Sure.
No, yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think those are all of the main points I wanted to discuss. Was there anything else you all wanted to talk about that was in this video?
I'll definitely let Mike have the last word and let him make his elegant point as he's done the whole video. But I'll just, as from a personal point of view, I feel like this was a little overhyped. And Allison and I are going to agree to disagree. I think going all the way back to the Lindsay Davis incident, people have known for years now that news people are lying. Okay. And this was nothing new. I think the general public, for the most part, have known this. But I also think this was Ivory Hecker's way of launching into the next chapter of her life. And I'm not knocking her for that. Go make your money, girl. Okay. Do your thing. And if you feel like this is the way to go about it, then by all means. But I just don't think it was much more than that.
I would say that I think she was censored on the topic, and like I said, she walked into that minefield of taboo topics now, and it just wasn't accepted then. It may be accepted today because there was a new report out last week that said hydroxychloroquine did work, and it was effective in treating people. So I think there's just a lot of frustration with her, and she just threw in the towel and said, that's it. But I think she does raise good points, and she did strike a nerve with an awful lot of people. If you looked at the comments on the Veritas webpage or YouTube page, she got a lot of support from people who really thought that she was telling the truth, that she was speaking out because she was censored, and it was kind of a go girl, you tell them, we know that they've been censoring the news. So there is a big issue with local news and national news, and the lack of believability that they have on multiple topics and in multiple areas. And certainly it's gotten a lot worse here after COVID and the censorship that we've seen on so many levels, which I think is really catastrophic for the nation, where it's just been accepted that certain stories can't be talked about, certain stories won't be told, and everybody either buys into it on the journalism side or they're afraid to say anything about it. Yeah. And long term for the First Amendment, I think it's a very, very bad thing. And maybe she was just a very, very little small part of that, and a small voice speaking out against it. Whether it was overplayed, I can't say exactly. We don't know all the details at the station, but I think she did strike a chord with a lot of people.
Bill, can you read that statement that Fox 26 released about her?
Yes, this was a press release given to or posted by the Houston Chronicle, the biggest TV state or the biggest newspaper in the Houston market. Fox 26 adheres to the highest editorial standards of accuracy and impartiality. This involves nothing more than a disgruntled former employee seeking publicity by promoting a false narrative produced by selective editing and misrepresentation. And and that's the end of the quote, but I take issue with that. This was poorly edited. I mean, this was this on a production side, the editor photog in me, this was terribly edited. So that's kind of the joking part of me, but also this was very much Fox saying, we don't care about her. Bye.
I mean, here's I guess my question here, because I know I've heard through the grapevine people saying that Fox management there may have considered her a problem employee, somebody who was butting heads with management on a regular basis. And I know that there are already people in the business that are writing her off. Now, you know what? There could be any number of other things that Fox 26 could say. Maybe there is a lot more to the story. There are so many things we don't know. And so, I don't know from management's perspective what was going on there. That said, I think what really needs to be contended with in any case like this is the points that she's making and not do a character assault, because you know what? The messenger isn't always perfect. Okay. And so, yeah, like, Let's talk about the actual issue of hydroxychloroquine. One of the reasons that a lot of people, wrote off the drug was not just Trump, but Dr. Stella Emanuel, because there was all this controversy about her and other things that she had said. But then people were just debating her, not talking about the drug. And I feel like we're in that cycle constantly where we're just like, yeah, but this person is a A, B, or C, but it's like, yeah, but what about what they're saying? Like, let's talk about what they're saying. So I guess that is really my point in trying to understand what's going on here. And I've heard Project Veritas is going to have more reporters I think they have one more next week that, I don't know how I didn't work this into my business plan. I don't know why I just quit and quietly started a YouTube channel, apparently, whatever, but they got more coming out of the woodwork. So we'll have to get together and do another video. But I just think that whether you're in the business, you're out of the business or whatever, let's listen to what the person's saying and try to, understand the points, because what's always been fascinating to me about mainstream journalists is that they'll be the first people to complain about so many things behind the scenes. Some of the same stuff that she's talked about, the demo, the soccer mom pitching the story, that you have to win the soccer mom over, the times, which, she didn't even talk about all the stuff that happens on a daily basis that makes it even worse. I mean, this is the gotcha stuff, but it's like the little things that happen every day are even worse than this when it comes to just setting journalism up for failure, in my opinion. And they didn't even get into any of that stuff that I've been, but most of this stuff I've said on my channel for a year now. And, it's not new. I just think that, it's important to contend with the ideas and not just write off a person. And journalists are very quick to do that when somebody, blows the whistle on this stuff. And it's like, but you guys talk about this at bars all the time. You talk about how much your boss is turning down your story pitches because of whatever reason. You talk about how you don't have the resources, you don't have the time, they don't want your ideas, all kinds of things, like again, the demos and the ratings and just the not being connected with the community and the age of the producers. I can't tell you how many people or the reporters, not just the producers, that, everybody in the newsroom is so young now. I heard so many complaints about that when I was in the business. So a lot of the stuff she said is just par for the course, but I know there's already going to be a movement to just kind of discredit everything by like I said, the points was she a problem employee? Did she just butt heads with management? Whatever. And I think we really need to discuss the issues, because even if, she had issues, some of the points she brings up really need to be addressed in order for journalism to regain any credibility with the public. And as you said, Mike, whether people in mainstream news want to agree with it or even see it, she did strike a chord with people. People are pissed at mainstream news, and they like the fact that she gave it to the man on live television. They just do.
Yeah, and I think maybe she's absolutely right, and maybe there's some middle ground there. We really don't know, but I'd say to all news managers, if any of them, watch this, you need to listen to people. She's been around for a while, right? She kind of knows what she was doing. And those people often that may be difficult to deal with occasionally from a management standpoint, may be the smartest ones who can really lead you down the right path and tell the stories that you really need to tell. Every news manager's made mistakes on saying, we're not going to do this story or that one. I have. But to me, it always came down to what were the best stories we could do, and I would always say, well, it's a story in the morning meetings, but is it the best story we could do? And it comes down to reporters to pitch those best stories too. But there's a lot of frustration in TV news, a lot of parameters that are set that nobody really understands. But, I give her credit for saying, hey, I don't like what's going on here in this censorship world, which I'm all about complaining about that. And maybe she didn't handle it right. We'll see what happens there.
I would also like to say, and I'm not coming to her defense or anything, but it's well known that Ivory worked in the Lexington, Kentucky market. I worked in the Lexington, Kentucky market, and I've spoken with a couple of different photogs who have worked with her for the 2 years that she was there. They had nothing but great things to say about her, that she was a hard worker, always on time. Could she be a little bit of a diva? Yeah, but who couldn't, especially in this business?
Me? I'm not a diva.
I ain't gonna lie.
I got pulled into the manager's office for the opposite. Like Allison, one time my manager said, "What's up with your face or makeup or something?" Like that was the kind of comment I got on a regular basis because I didn't wear enough. But anyway, continue.
All I can say, I've never met the woman, wouldn't know her if I ran into her on the street, and I've watched the video 3 or 4 times. But people that I've talked to that I trust don't have really a bad thing to say about her, and I think that goes a long way.
One last quick question. Where does this go for local newsrooms? Do you guys think that they're going to start changing protocol because now they could be recorded? I mean, do you think this is going to kind of send a shockwave among managers, like watching this and thinking, oh my gosh, like this could happen? Does this change anything?
I think every news director who watches the Veritas video, which again was poorly edited and poorly constructed, we'd have to agree with that because it didn't make a lot of sense. A lot of it was just like, here, what? But I think an awful lot of news directors would be kind of scared about that for sure. Yeah.
I agree. And I also believe that there are some news directors and some people in administration who just don't care because they think they're untouchable. And we're going to have on the other side of the coin, we're going to have more instances like this because they're going to think that they're protected or untouchable. So I can say whatever I want to. And, that's what's going to lead to more of what we've seen now with this instance.
And
okay, guys. Go ahead. Sorry.
One last quick thing. It's really tough. It's really tough being a reporter, Allison, as you know, right? There are a lot of frustrations and you win some and you lose some. I had a reporter a number of years ago who was my political reporter, and he did a great job. But we didn't always agree on which direction we should go on. But man, he did a great job. And boy, did he give me grief and a hard time. But he always did great work, and I always tolerated him. And on my last day there at the station, he came into my office and he shook my hand and he said, "Hey, thanks for not firing me." And I always remember that because I was never going to fire him. He always did a great job, and I was always willing to put up with him because he brought in different ideas. He was cantankerous, but he always did great work. And there are a lot of people out there like that in newsrooms too.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that there's a real drought of leadership. There are plenty of managers in the news business these days, but there are not very many leaders.
That's because us leaders are smart enough to know when to get out.
Yeah, we do YouTube now. Yeah, but it's true. There's a relationship there that helps both parties, and I've had those instances where, on one hand, maybe there was a story that was like, okay, I didn't do a great job pitching why this mattered. But then there were other stories that I pitched that were very obviously important that were shot down because of my manager's bias. What happened in this particular case, we don't know exactly. But, like I said, again, I think it's an opportunity to contend with the points made, and let's see what comes of it. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks for doing this. Again, Mike Rausch, Bill Dorris, and I guess we'll see everybody next time.
Thank you, Allison.
Thanks a lot.